that are either traveling or not able to make it today. But we'll get started, and I'll keep an eye on the door and keep admitting people as we go forward. So with that, there's one quick thing I do want to say to all of our parents. Thank you for joining. Hope everyone had a fantastic Thanksgiving, and I know it's a busy time of year, so I do appreciate everyone jumping on. This is a very special topic, and Danielle will tell you a little bit more about that, but I do want to kind of give a little airtime to something that Maria wanted us to put forward. Today is Giving Tuesday, and there was a quick fundraiser that went out earlier in the day. If you haven't received that email, look for it either on our Facebook page or on the Vanguardian or CVHS PTO website, and you should be able to find it. Also, keep an eye out for an email that's coming out. We are doing a Light Up the Tree celebration later this week. It's kind of last minute, but we had a very exciting development earlier in the week, and we were able to bring to CVHS a 12-foot brand new Christmas tree, and we want everyone's help to come decorate it. So look for that email coming out later this week. With that, all of those advertisements, thank you, Danielle. I will pass it back on to you.
Thank you all for being here, and especially just a few nights after the break. I'm excited. We have a really awesome guest tonight who's going to talk about high school portfolio and sort of your child's extracurriculars, coursework, resume, mentorship, internships, sort of the things that come together to help tell the story of who your kiddo is, and how to navigate assembling that and putting it, thinking about it, I guess, as well. Perry Kalmus, am I pronouncing it correctly, Perry?
Yeah, Kalmus, that's perfect.
Kalmus, okay, is co-founder of Akala. Akala says they are on a mission to level the playing field and access to college admissions guidance. Perry and his co-founder Barbara are two of the most sought after education consultants in the world. They're here with us tonight, having helped the children of celebrities, Fortune 500 CEOs, and international business folks. They've worked with over 15,000 families in their 30 years in the business. And I guess a few years ago, they realized that they really wanted to help also contribute to addressing the gap in guidance that tends to happen, that it's maybe only the Fortune 500 folks who are having access to folks like this otherwise. So that's part of their mission as well, is to help all families, more kinds of families, and more families in total gain access to this kind of consultancy. So they're actually also two of the stars on the ethical side, I will say, of the Varsity Blues, the Operation Varsity Blues Netflix documentary. So if you've seen that, you're, I guess, only now 0 degrees of separation. And if you haven't seen it, you may want to check it out. So I'll stop talking. Perry, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to hand over the virtual mic.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet everybody. I've been reading a bunch about your guys' school. It's a pretty amazing place. Real quick, can people see me? I don't know. It said that only the host. I got some note that only the host can see me. I don't know if people can see me or not.
No, we cannot.
You know what? We cannot. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, because I didn't know if it was my setup.
It said it's in like focus mode is ending.
Okay. Hopefully
Okay.
that will give us.
Can we see me now?
No.
Let me go off and on. Hold on.
There is always something new.
Seems like Zoom is just.
I hope that
there we go. We see you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so now you can see me. Nice to meet you all. Great to be here. Excited to talk to you about this subject matter, because I think it is actually of all the many pieces of the college admissions pie, this this sort of through line, I think, is probably the most important today. And so, yeah, excited to talk to you. Let me see if I can share my screen here.
And just quickly, I know you all are coming, I think you all are coming back next week for a different topic. Is that you, or is that someone else within your organization who will be with us?
That'll be both me and Barbara. Barbara couldn't be here today. She's traveling, but
Okay.
yeah, it'll be me and Barbara. I'll talk to you all about the
Awesome.
personal statement, which is the other really important piece of
Yeah.
the college admission. They're all important, I think, at the end of the day. But yeah, so great to meet you. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Cool. I'm gonna leave it in this mode because I think it gets or actually let me see if make it a little bigger. So yeah, as she said, my name is Perry Kalmus. It's so great to be here. We are the founders of Akala, which was designed to level the playing field and access to people like us and our level of expertise. We are backed by some of the bigger names in education, like Google and USC's Rossier School of Education, among others. You may have seen us, as she mentioned, in the big Netflix documentary, as well as quoted in a lot of national news organizations. As Danielle mentioned, Barbara and I have almost 70 years of combined experience in college admissions. We've worked with over 15,000 kids. And so, we just have realized that when you have our level of expertise behind you, it really does help you, because there's so many nuances to college admissions that frankly, very few people get access to. So we wanted to sort of level that playing field. So obviously the subject matter today, your portfolio, extracurriculars, community service, as we like to call it, your story, right? What is your student's story, and how do you tell it? Because ultimately college admissions is all about storytelling. For those who are on the call, whose parents went to school here in the United States, and for those who didn't, you're actually similarly in the same boat. Okay, if you didn't go here, obviously this is all brand new to you. If you did go here, guess what? It's all brand new to you, because nothing about college admissions today looks like it did 20 and 30 years ago. We always point out, I don't think I actually have this slide with me today, but we always point out school admissions rates back in the 90s versus today, right? So roughly 30 years ago, right? So the two I love to talk about is one is out here in Los Angeles, USC, University of Southern California. In 1990, it had a 75% acceptance rate. I think this year it's going to be in around 8. But even crazier than that is Northeastern up in Boston, very popular school. It had a 97% acceptance rate back in 1990. This year it's going to be around 4. So, schools that you would not have expected to be competitive are now very competitive. And it becomes really important how you navigate that for your child. I think I would love if actually people in the chat can maybe just throw in, just so I can maybe gear some of the way I talk about things. If you could just throw in like what grades your child or children are in, because it just curious to know, are we dealing with younger, older, etc. So let's jump into it. So how do you tell your story? Let's first talk about the main pieces. We'll fly through this because this is not what we're here to talk about today. You have your main pieces, but I do think it's important to mention these only because this is your sort of base, get in the door of a conversation, right? As we have a little feature on our site called the College Chance Me feature. And the way we refer to your chances of getting into schools is whether or not you're in the conversation, right? And so this slide is really dedicated to those things, right? GPA, test scores, course rigor is probably the most important thing. Are you taking the most challenging course load available to you at your school? And I want to make this very clear, guys. You are only going to be judged on your school. So let's say there were 10 APs available to you at Carnegie, but the next door school in the town next over had 25 APs available to them. I'm just giving ridiculous numbers for the sake of example. You will not be, let's say a kid there took 22 out of 25, but you only took 9 out of 10. You're not going to be judged negatively 9 versus 22. It's really 9 out of 10, right? And that's how you're being judged. So this is sort of the base level. I will say it straight up. If you don't have the GPA, if you don't have the test scores, if you don't have the course rigor, it is much more challenging to get into the super competitive schools, because that really is, like I said, the base, right? Like, are you in the conversation? To get into the conversation, you sort of need these things. I do want to just mention here before I jump to the whole point of today's talk, progression of performance, very important. If you did have a rough freshman year, that's okay. There are plenty of rough freshman years who have gotten into Harvard and Princeton and Stanford and all of the schools. But they do want to see this progression of performance in an upward and to the right progression. So that's your sort of, are you in the conversation? And then we get to what we're talking about today, right? Extracurriculars, demonstrated interest, which we'll talk about, awards and competition achievements, right? Community service, summer experience, letters of rec, super important. And then sports or special talents is really more a unique sort of thing. You know, if you are doing something that the school needs, right? A soccer player or a tuba player or something like that, that's where that category counts. And actually now's a pretty good time. Well, let me jump into the next slide and then I'll bring it up. So for us at Acala, you know, we start with kids as early as grade 7. And the reason we do that is that it gives us time to start to mold the student into who they are going to be, right, over the course of their high school experience. And it allows us to hit on what we call the 3 pillars of college admissions, in particular for what the subject matter is for this talk today, which are commitment. Did you do something for a long period of time? Depth. Did you go deeper than just the one thing? And of course, differentiation. Have you found a way to differentiate yourself from your peers? So I'm going to, let me just look at that chat. I see a bunch of, okay, yeah. So not a lot of 9th, 10th, 111th, 112th. Okay. So, I would love, well, I guess it's a little harder to do it on Zoom, right? But I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to venture a guess that there's a lot of students here who are doing one of 3 extracurriculars: Model Congress, Model UN, and debate. I see a little smile. So guys, here's the problem for differentiation. Okay. And just to be clear, I love those clubs. They provide incredible life skills: how to formulate an argument, how to public speak, how to work well with others, all kinds of amazing skills that come from those 3 clubs. But here's the problem, and I'm going to use the example of sports to show you what the problem is. How many people here, maybe we could throw just a little bit in the chat for a second. How many people here have a kid who has played sports, and not just played sports, but has done so for longer than just high school? Can we throw in some yeses if you have? Okay, I see a few yeses. So, okay, so a good group of yeses. So, guys, here's the thing. If your child is not, let me go back to this slide, going to play sports or have a special talent, tuba, whatever, for a college, like being recruited for it, here's the problem you're up against. And by the way, here's how you know I'm being dead honest with you. I was a college soccer player. I was one of the few people who make it to that next level. Okay. And nobody loves sports more than I do. I think there's such incredible life skills that you can learn from it. But here's the problem. There's 36,000 high schools in America. So let's do some basic back of napkin math. Okay. 10 guys teams, 10 girls teams, roughly. That's we'll round down. That's 700,000 sports teams in America. Okay. You figure average maybe 3 seniors, 4 seniors per team, right? Call it 2.5 million athletes. Colleges just got tired of hearing about it. They love it. They love that you do it. But all the time, parents come to me and say, but little Susie's been doing this since she was 5. That's 12 years. You said, what more commitment do you want, parent? Right? But the problem is that if little Susie's not going to be offering that sport to the college, right? Meaning like I'm going to become a field hockey player, soccer player, tennis player, whatever it is, then it becomes, yes, you have the commitment. And maybe you have the depth. Maybe you didn't just play for school. You went and played for a club team, and then you did a bunch of stuff over the summer. But there is no differentiation because there's 2.5 million people, right? And only 100,000 or so are going to make it to college sports. It is the same thing with Model Congress, Model UN, and debate, okay? As I said, I love these things, but yes, you could show commitment to them, but there is no depth and there is no differentiation. So for us, as you think about your storytelling, you have to think about, and I also should add this in. Sadly today, there is no room for the explorer in high stakes, low acceptance rate schools, which I think is a crying shame, but you have no choice. If you want to play this game, this is what you have to do. You have to be able to tell a story that falls in a lane on your application. Okay? So maybe you're a computer scientist. Maybe you're a political scientist. Maybe you're a writer, an artist, whatever it is, you kind of have to pick a lane, which I think is such a shame. But again, we have to play by the rules. And the rules are, back in the day, they used to look for well-rounded kids. That is no longer the case. They want well-rounded classes. How do you get a well-rounded class? You get an expert artist and an expert political scientist and an expert computer scientist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is how they're building their classes, sadly. And so you've got to show that commitment, that depth, and that differentiation in order to separate yourself from the pack. So you could do debate, but also, what is the end goal? Are you doing debate, but you want to be an artist? Right? If you're doing debate and you want to be an artist, that debate is going to hold no value, or very little anyway, on your application to a competitive admissions rate school. Okay? So when we talk about these things, and I'll just pull up this slide. I usually put it in a play mode, but I've been having trouble with my screen sharing. I'm just going to fill, for some reason, this survey won't let me move it. If you look at this slide, this is most of the admissions criteria that officers are going to use when judging your child. Now, there are things you can control and things you can't. The things you cannot control are in blue. You guys are in the Houston area. There's nothing you can do about that, right? That's either going to be good for you or bad for you, right? What's your family background, your race, your ethnicity, your gender. By the way, don't assume that race or ethnicity will not be taken into account just because of the Supreme Court. All the colleges have found ways around that. via their college essay questions that they ask. And so that is still heavily going to be taken into account. But those are the things you can't control. But all of these other things are things you can. Some of them are from the first slide that I showed you, right? GPA, test scores, rigor, whatever. But the rest is what we're talking about today. Your extracurriculars, your community service, your summer experience. Are you going to do research, internships, etc.? Now, or actually, I'll come back to the internships. One of the most important things that you can do, and this is for the 9th and 10th graders, right? For the 11th graders, you still have time. There's things you could do this year in 11th grade, and there's things you could do this summer, is that you could start early, right? Start to plan out, okay, well, if I'm doing debate as a 9th grader, what am I going to do next year? How am I going to layer on top of that, right? Let's just keep going down this path, debate, model Congress, model UN. If you're doing one of those three, the story that you are hinting to the college admissions officer is, I want to go into politics and government, political science, history, right? That's the lane. If you're trying to be a computer scientist, and I will tell you, and this is, for the 11th graders, the 12th graders, when you start thinking about your major selection, I have a student right now, I never have to go far back to make a point. I have a student right now who came to me and said, Perry, I think I'm going to change from psychology and I'm going to declare business. I said, Lauren, you can't do that. She said, why? Like, I talked to my dad and I really want to go into business. I said, no, you can totally go into business once you get to college. Okay. But you cannot claim that you want to go into business. And she couldn't believe it. And I said, here's the thing, Lauren. I want you to play a little game. I'm now Lauren. I'm submitting my application. And I said, pull up your Common App. And she shared her screen and she pulled up her Common application. And I said, I'm now considering you for business. Show me what I should look at on this resume that's going to make me say, yes, I want this girl for business. And she had nothing, zero. She hadn't even taken AP Econ, which would be, again, like, just to get into the conversation, you have to take AP Econ, right? Meanwhile, I have students who have started their own businesses and done internships at startups and all these things that have shown depth and differentiation. Why would they take her over them? Right? So that's how you really need to start thinking about your story and falling into your lane, right? I by the way, I deal with this always with CS kids, computer science. We won't keep doing the Zoom polls, but I'd be ventured to say, based on what I read about your school, that there's a good amount of computer science potential majors. If you think that you're walking into MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, University of Washington, UIUC, those are I believe your top 5 for computer science. Okay. If you think, and Georgia Tech, if you think you are walking into any of those schools with AP Comp Sci, and that's your whole resume, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not happening for you. And forgive me for being blunt, but that's really my job, is to be honest with everybody and tell you, like, I get AP Comp Sci kids all the time. I have never seen one get into one of those schools because they don't even have commitment really, because they took one class, right? But they also don't have that depth and differentiation. So what are the things that you can layer on top of that if you're a Comp Sci kid? Well, number one, you could go get online certifications. A lot of them are free or very low cost in a bunch of different coding languages, right? Immediately, you're now a layer above AP Comp Sci. What else can you do? You can get with some friends. Maybe there's a business club. Maybe there's an entrepreneurship club. If there's not, maybe you could start one, right? And then And then you could start a company. Someone has a cool idea. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your friend, maybe it's someone in the club. Someone has a cool idea, and you are going to code whatever the product is going to be. That's different, right? Maybe you hit up a startup in Houston. Houston has a great little startup scene. Say, hey, I want to do some work. I'll work for free. I'll do anything. Now you're differentiating. Now you're showing depth. When I'm sitting there as the MIT or Carnegie Mellon admissions officer, that's the kid I want on my campus, because that kid is going to get involved, going to do a lot of things, and already has a impressive resume within that lane. Okay. So starting early is one. I mentioned differentiating. Community service, guys, is a really great opportunity for you to continue to show depth and differentiation. Just to be clear, any community service is better than zero. Okay. The dream community service is that you have the community service in your lane. So just because I'm on the computer science kick for now, maybe you went and found a bunch of nonprofits in Houston and you call them up and their websites are terrible. And you tell them in much nicer words that they're terrible. And you say, hey, I'd really love to help you improve your website. I'll do it for free. Now you're doing community service and you're building in your lane, right? So just to be clear on the importance of community service, you may have heard of two schools called Harvard and Stanford, okay? Harvard and Stanford did a joint effort called Turning the Tide. You can all look it up. Turning the Tide, I can try and put it in the chat. Turning the Tide. They also, within Turning the Tide, they had an initiative, if you will, called Making Caring Common. Okay. Making Caring Common. Can everyone see that if I put that in the chat? Okay, cool. So they had this thing called Making Caring Common. And the idea was like, we need to start rewarding better humans in the college admissions process. So don't poo-poo your community service. For those who are starting early, and let me give you another bit of advice on community service. Out here in Los Angeles, there is a very popular move, which is there's a camp out here called Camp Harmony. 1 week a year, the kids show up. They do 7 days. They get something in the neighborhood of 100 hours of community service. And they do it all 4 years. As you might guess from my tone, no college cares. Why? Because the idea is there's zero commitment there. You might say, but they did it all 4 years. But from a community service standpoint, from the eye of an admissions officer, they're sitting there going, wait a second. So you're telling me you cared about the world for 1 week, and zero for 51 other weeks? That's how people view those when you go down to Costa Rica and, and by the way, at least the Camp Harmony thing is here in LA. When you hear about the kids who go do these service trips and whatnot, just to be clear, I love those. I think they're great life experiences and whatnot. They're just not good for college, just to be clear. So if you have done them, don't feel bad. Like, they're really amazing, but the colleges are going to sit there and go, so you're telling me there were no problems in Houston?
Do we freeze? I thought we were having dramatic effect, but now I don't. I think Perry may be frozen.
It's frozen. Yeah, it's frozen.
Oh, okay. Hopefully he'll see that.
I'm texting him now.
Okay, thank you. And then he can log back in if he needs to, but
All right, can you hear me?
I think the point is, yeah. Okay, so you were just saying, you're telling me there was nothing in Houston.
Okay. I'm glad you heard at least that. I was like, oh my God.
That part, we heard that part.
Okay, sorry. So their response is like, so that you're telling me there was nothing in Houston, there were no problems, right? So you had to go to Costa Rica or Thailand or whatever it is. And I don't know if you heard this part, but just to be clear, those programs are amazing. Like they're life-changing and they can be incredible for your kid and whatnot. They're just not going to help you get into a competitive school. So if you have to sort of line that up. Now, I'm going to give you a scenario. Let me go back in here. I'm going to give you a scenario where can you see me okay?
Yeah, we see the slide now.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure it wasn't the slide sharing. So I'm going to give you a scenario. It's the same 400 hours, but the difference is you can get into a very competitive school, which is you found something. Now, to be clear, as I said, it does not have to be in your lane, right? You could be a computer scientist and help the homeless, right? Or take care of animals, right? So just to be clear, any community service is better than zero. But to bring it into the in your lane concept, right? Let's say you found 5 nonprofits in Houston that have struggling looking websites, and you decided to help them. And every Sunday, you went to the nonprofit and you sat there for 2 hours, maybe 10 a.m. to noon, and you worked on it for a year. So we'll call it 50 weeks. You took 2 weeks off. That's the same 100 hours. But now you've shown commitment. You've shown depth because you're now still in the computer science game, right? And it's different. Not a lot of kids are doing that, right? So you're helping to differentiate yourself and pull yourself away from all the AP comp sci kids. Okay. So
Harry, what about students who go in the summer, say, and they commit for 3 solid months locally? They're doing other stuff. Maybe they're working, maybe they're doing an internship too, or not. But so that they are showing, longer than the week, and in the third world country in a 4-star resort kind of setting.
Exactly.
but it's not, all year long. Where does that come out?
Yeah, great question. And the short answer is wonderful and awesome. Yeah, if you're gonna take your whole, if you want to make the claim like, hey, the school year's crazy, I've got all these APs, I've got extracurricular, like it's really hard for me to carve out that time, but I'm gonna dedicate my whole summer to this thing, right? Then 100%, that's great, and no different than the 2 hours every Sunday. So yeah, I would say one of those two are probably your answer.
Okay,
great.
thanks.
So course rigor is just, I just like to throw it out there. This is the most important thing, right? So like to get in the conversation, they need to know that you took the most challenging course loads available to you. Okay. I can't tell you how many Algebra 2 kids, and again, for a lot of kids, they're never going to use math again. So Algebra 2 is more than enough in their lives, right? But I cannot tell you how many Algebra 2 kids come to me and they want to go to MIT, right? And then I have kids who took BC Calculus as freshmen. It's like, if you're MIT, who are you taking, right? So, make sure your course rigor, especially within your lane, whatever your lane is. If you want to be a history major and you didn't take APUSH and AP Euro, like you're not in the conversation. They're not going to get you in the conversation. So, especially you want to be, look, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know why, if you want to be a history major, you need to also have taken BC calculus or AB calculus or any calculus, right? I think it's kind of ridiculous, but colleges have found value in you taking the most challenging course load available to you. So you do want to take it in every lane, really, but especially in your lane. You will, at least in the college application, be able to explain away, hey man, I'm just not a math person, right? Like, but look at all the things I've done. AP Euro, AP US history. That was my get in the conversation. But then look at the club I started and look what I did over the summer. And, right now you're telling a really great story that can kind of wipe away maybe in this example I'm giving, the fact that you only took algebra 2, right? So you do want to consider it. Just along the lines of what Danielle was just saying, summer experience, guys, is really an opportunity for you guys to differentiate. Now, I will throw out one thing. Be very careful with this research concept. Okay, and I put this picture up intentionally. I'll never forget, I was at NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. And NACAC had brought in the Dean of Admissions or someone in admissions at UPenn, the Ivy League school. And she gave this statistic. She said the biggest mistake they ever made at UPenn was releasing a statistic from a couple years before. So a couple years before, they gave their usual statistics, right? We have this many, broken down by race and broken down by gender and broken down by demographics and whatever. And then they released this like little line somewhere at the bottom that said I'm going to butcher the numbers now, but they said something like an 18% of our applicants who we accepted performed research, during their high school time. The next year, 1 year, that number jumped to like 40%. And then all of a sudden it was like 65, 70%. And again, in the differentiation game, research has become kind of like, don't just do research. Now, again, there's exceptions. I have a student this year who's a great exception. He was on a tour at NYU. There happened to be a professor from Northwestern who was also on the tour for his daughter. Everybody introduced themselves, and my student thought what the guy said he was doing at Northwestern. He ran this I'm blanking on what it is now, but basically an AI in medicine lab at Northwestern. It turned out that my student had a podcast all about, it's called What Lies Ahead. It's all about the future, a lot of talk about AI. And he approached this professor and just said, hey, this is so interesting what you're doing. Can I ask you a few questions? They totally hit it off. The professor invited him to join the lab over the summer. Then he did so well that the professor invited him to run his own study. That's this very organic story of doing research. Okay. The problem is now everyone, once Penn published that, it was over. Now companies started sprouting, and you can now hire a company that's going to link you with someone at UC Berkeley, and you're going to do research for them. And you just got to be careful. Anytime you're paying to play, it's not that it's bad, right? Again, if you can make it all line up within your story, that your extracurriculars, your main academics, your community service, and your summer experience all sort of fit this through line of the story, a pay-to-play thing can be okay. However, if it's hey, I really want to be a computer scientist, and check out this research I did on cancer, right? At some fancy name, like at Brown this summer, right? But what, that doesn't vibe. And so colleges are going to look at that and be like, I don't really know. I'm not sure about this one. So you just want to be thinking of starting early and really starting to plan out your extracurricular summer experience so they all make sense in a story. And when we talk next week about the personal statement, right? We'll talk about how you can sort of weave that in. But the idea is, that there's gotta be a story that will allow them to plug you into a hole that creates that well-rounded class I mentioned. Right?
I
So
think fit matters, right? Like fit, like just that it makes sense. The
Yes.
things you're doing fit with what it is you're saying you want to do at the place.
exactly. Yeah. And you know, we talk about fit on the flip side of that, but yes, it's interesting. I've never really thought of it that way. Yeah. They have to feel like you're a fit for them. Right. That's 100%. We also talk about fit as in like, make sure you go to a school that makes sense for you. Right. Like you don't want to go to, I'm just going to be ridiculous now, Tisch School of the Arts at NYU, right? If you want to be a biotech engineer or biomedical engineer. So you do want to make sure that the school's are the right fit for you. And the school wants to look, yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. The school wants to look at you and say, does this kid fit into what we need? Now, last thing I'll say, and then I'll open up for questions. Major selection. Every year I get this question. And so I'm just going to nip it in the bud right now. Hey, Perry, I noticed that there is a major for Nordic studies at UCLA. This is true. I actually haven't looked in a couple of years, but forever they've had this Nordic studies major, right? And kids come to me all the time saying, I'm just going to declare for Nordic studies. But it's the example I gave you earlier with the girl who wanted to declare for business and had nothing on her resume for business. It's not going to work. Now, if you really wanted to bet the house on black, right, which is like a very dangerous game if you're not passionate about it, you could start doing all kinds of Nordic study type things from 9th grade. But that's like, what if then you don't get in? Now you're just like sitting on this Nordic studies thing and you're not even passionate about it. So, you know, we are really big fans of like making sure part of the starting early thing is finding that passion. You know, the time to explore is 7th, 8th, 9th grade. Like really start to try out different things, see what makes you tick, right? On our platform, we have kids watch videos, right? TED Talks within their interest category so that you can really start to say, you know what, I really am into. Actually, I have a student right now who has watched a whole bunch of videos on our platform on underwater, on marine biology, right? And she is like blown away. She is deathly afraid of being underwater. But we explained to her, and again, she never knew, you don't ever have to go underwater to be a marine biologist, right? There's a million and one things you can do in marine biology that will never put your mouth below water. And I think it's really important for in those early years, you know, if you do have those kids, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, get them exploring early. And then in 10th grade, you can really start to dive deep so that you could show those 3 pillars: commitment, depth, and differentiation. So, yeah, with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions. And
I just want to quickly, 2 quick things. So one is, before we move on, I wanted to ask a question about the pay to play, because I know that, you know, they aren't all created equal and there's not much except for maybe some internships that isn't pay to play in terms of like going to a college campus. And, you know, so if you have a comment on that or how to
Yes.
differentiate.
Actually, yeah, you're hitting on a lot of things. Yeah, every time you hit on something, I'm like, ooh, yes, that point too. Yes, couple things. With the pay to play, you know, if you are going to go to say, you know, I think Brown has probably one of the more famous summer academic institutions or some programs. They used to have a lot more value than they do now in terms of admissions. So very similar to like if you want to send your kid to Costa Rica, or if you want to do debate, model Congress, model UN, sports, they have enormous value, just not personally, but they may not have a lot of value in the admissions process, right? Being on a college campus is enormously valuable. You get to practice living in a dorm. You get to see that school's campus, get a, you know, it's not 100% the vibe of a, you know, the year, but there are a lot of in college kids that stay on campus, you'll catch a vibe of a school. There's a lot of value there. But from a pay to play perspective, colleges have just sort of started to say, you know what? We're not going to reward anymore the kids who can afford to do these programs.
Yeah.
We love them, we think they're great, but and maybe they're a notch in the kids' overall story, right? But we're not going to reward it as much. Now, the question then, of course, becomes, well, what can you do then to start to impress colleges? Well, let's go down the STEM route. MIT and Stanford have a concept called open courseware. Let me put that in the chat. Oh, I see someone wrote about getting a job. We'll talk about that too. Open courseware. So MIT and Stanford, you could just Google MIT, Stanford, open. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Sorry. Open courseware. They have opened up, guys, their entire STEM classes. You could take for free online. Colleges would much rather see that you went and did 5 MIT classes on electrical engineering or whatever it is than to see that you went and did one of these summer programs. Some of the other options out there are these they call them MOOCs, massive open courseware, massive online open courseware. Things like Coursera, if you've heard of that, or Udemy. I should put these in the chat. My son, Berkeley open course. Yeah, there's a bunch of schools that have done it now, that have done these open courseware. Coursera is one, Udemy is another. These are ones that are either free or pretty low cost. It'll be like $50 maybe to take a class. That's a great way. And sorry, I keep thinking of thoughts. As obviously I was trying to narrow it to the lane that we're talking about today, but be very careful, guys. They would rather see this. We get a lot of students who self-study APs. Okay. I would venture to say from Carnegie's online school profile that there are plenty of you on this call whose kids have either already or are planning to self-study APs. That was cool 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But again, in the differentiation games, colleges started saying, all right, we've gone too far with this. We've got kids turning in 23 APs, even though they only took 6 of them on the school grounds. So what I would say to you is, if you wanted to self-study 1 or 2 classes because it allowed you to take some other class that's in your lane on campus, I'm okay with it. But please do not self-study 6, 8 courses. You're better off either doing one of these open courseware things, doing a Coursera or a Udemy, or doing dual enrollment stuff and taking community college classes that would actually also count for credit, right? The open courseware, just to be clear for parents and kids, does not count for credit. Okay, so you will get 0 credit for doing them, but it can help you a lot in terms of getting in. And same with Coursera, you will get 0 credit for that. So if you wanted to make college cheaper, you could go and do some dual enrollment classes at the local community college and just get the kind of as we call them, gen ed requirements, right? If you're going to be a computer scientist or biologist, and maybe you go take Econ 101 at the local community college. Those will be transferable credits. And it's a way you might be able to enter college as a sophomore, right? If you wanted to help bring the cost of college down. So yeah, that was the long way of answering your question, but yeah, really important around the pay to play stuff.
What about so part of what I'm hearing is genuine interest matters. If you're genuinely interested in something, or it authentically fits into your lane and sort of your story, go for it. But if you think that you're going to take a bunch of steps so that that's going to make you more marketable, that's a flimsy notion.
Yeah, and yes to your question, and my, look, I sympathize with families, right? I get families all the time that say, you know what, little Johnny doesn't know what he wants to do yet.
Right. You're
And
not fully formed in high school, as it turns out.
Exactly. And as I said, like, I think it's totally ridiculous that they're forcing kids into these lanes. Okay. But what I would say to that family, what I do say to those families, if you have a kid who's just like hasn't figured it out yet, that's totally fine. Okay. Like, that's like most important. B, try and expose them to as much as possible. There is something out there that makes them tick. I don't know what it is. Right? For this student I mentioned earlier, like, she watched a video on underwater scuba diving. She was horrified because she doesn't want to go underwater, but she now has found this passion for marine biology. Expose them to as much as you can. Once they find something that just even makes them tick a little, start to dive deeper into it. Okay.
So there was a question about the business, and just quickly, that was the other thing. So Perry has this coupon up here, and just as the PTO, we are bringing these folks to you. They have a lot of experience, they've been generous with their time, and we also are a nonprofit, so we're not, saying we don't want to make anyone feel like, oh, they have to do this or not, but this is an awesome opportunity if it's something you're interested in, and they are willing to do a one-on-one consultation with you and your child, or I don't know, Perry, do you do it with the child only or the family, or?
Yeah, just to be clear, our nonprofit is called Equity and Access. We are part of a program in New York called Startup New York. As part of that program, we do seminars like this, and we also offer free. It's like 15-20 minute consultation, just so if you had specific questions. Obviously every kid's different. If you have some specific questions, we're happy to jump on a call and answer it. If you do want to sign up, great. If we do want to also offer a discount for Carnegie kids, but no pressure at all. It could just be like, hey, we want to get 15 minutes of your time, and just ask a couple key questions about my child that are specific to my child. So,
and that may help someone figure out if this is something that they want to move forward to with. We know our college counseling folks are great, and there's two for the 850 students or something. So that includes helping freshmen and sophomores. Everyone registers. So some families may want to have exactly this kind of service. So thank you very much for offering that. And then I wanted to go back up to Karima's question in the chat. She had said, it sounds like you're better off getting a job over the summer or volunteering.
Oh yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Guys, I love work experience, but again, differentiation matters. Okay. I have a student a couple years ago out here in LA who worked at a high-end wedding dress boutique. Okay. They sell dresses for like $40,000, right? So they don't need 1,000 people to walk in every month. They need like 3. And that was about how many people would walk in like a week, like 3 or 5, right? And so for this girl to just sit there, I mean, she wasn't even doing inventory. It's not like working at like a Gap or a Old Navy or one of those. So when you do go for a job, try and my stance is, and again, this is a little bit unconventional, but it's my belief. I always say, do like the worst job possible. Like whatever is like the worst job you could do. And I will use myself as the example. And I do believe that this was the key factor in me getting into Williams College and a bunch of other top 25 schools, which is I worked golf course maintenance. Okay. I will tell you, and you guys, Houston probably knows an even crazier heat and humidity than New Jersey does, but in the middle of New Jersey, it's 100 degrees, 100% humidity. They would give me the worst jobs. Like I would have to go weed whack in a creek, and snakes would be biting at my rubber boots, and like I'd be sweating profusely, and like it was a horrible, 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 horrible job. But it was incredibly valuable for a few reasons. Number one, I knew in that moment exactly what I never want to do again. I can't even drive by a golf course today without saying, like, don't send me back there. Right. Number two, very important. I learned the value of hard work ethic, time management, showing up on time, right? All those kinds of things. And then number three, which I would argue is maybe the most important thing about doing a really difficult and challenging job, is I learned to really appreciate the people that do those jobs full time, right? I went to one of these fancy boarding schools on the East Coast. I'm not sure I even knew those people existed prior to doing that job. After that job, within a week of starting the school in the fall, I knew all of their names. Within a month, I knew about their family lives, right? Because I was so appreciative of this incredible, like our campus was stunning, but I always took it for granted. And so I think if you're going to do a work thing, working at the local smoothie house, or, the things I hear a lot, smoothie house, working at the mall, like it's okay. It's again, better than zero, like community service, but, see if there's a job you could do that would be really like challenging for you and difficult and like, make you have to think a little bit. Number one, you might end up with a great college essay. Okay. So that was my college. Actually, I had 2 college essays, but like that was one of mine, was the lessons learned from working at that thing. And, like I had a student out here a few years ago who worked as the busser at a pizza shop. She was not the server. She was not the one getting tipped. She was the one cleaning up all the dishes and cleaning them in the back and mopping the floors. And, and she talked about the same thing, how like for her, it was like an extra $12 an hour. But there was a guy at her job who that was his 3rd job of the day. And what that meant for her, and the juxtaposition of her fancy private school with this guy at her thing. So I'm a big fan of work experience, but I do think don't just work at Panera, right? Like do something that really challenges you, to be a better human, and to work hard and pick up a lot of those skills. I did want to say one thing real quick, just from the thought before, which was, what was it? It was about, I forget what your question was. I had a thought. I was like, "Oh, I should remember that." Okay, if I remember it, I'll ask it. I thought I would remember it, but I don't.
There was a quick question around the National Merit Scholarship. And if you could talk about that for the top 1% on the PSAT score.
Yeah. So, real quick with the PSAT, it's one of those things. It can do zero to hurt you. Most kids at Harvard and Princeton and all these fancy schools, are not National Merit Scholars. Okay, most of our students who we get into those schools are not National Merit Scholars. We do get National Merit Scholars. The idea with the PSAT, and just to be clear, the P in PSAT does not mean practice, although it happens to be a great practice. But the purpose, stands for preliminary, and the purpose of the PSAT is to identify National Merit Scholars. If you can get it, it's great. Obviously every state is different in terms of the cutoff to become a National Merit Scholar. It definitely can help your cause, but will do zero to hurt your cause if you don't. So don't stress out if you just didn't get the National Merit thing. Along the lines of testing, I'll just say real quick is, look, I think everyone should be going in there and taking these tests. More schools every year are starting to go back to it. It's a small group right now, but they're going to be more and more. I think that's where we're headed. You know, everybody should assume they have to take it, and just feel lucky that you're in this test optional universe where you have a second chance to get into a school. When your parents and I were applying to college, right? If they were applying here in the US, if you didn't have the score, you didn't apply to the school. That was it. You had no chance, right? Nowadays, you actually do, right? You can just not get the score you were hoping for, but you've got straight A's and you've built this lane that we keep talking about, this story. You've got as good a shot as anybody else. But I do think that if you can get a score, it's yet another thing, right? When they're trying to differentiate amongst these kids. I'm going to give you guys a quick example of when this is 2019. Okay, so this was before the pandemic. It only got way worse after the pandemic. In 2019, we met with Yale, their admissions office, and they told us this story about how they had 35,000 applicants at the time. And in this day and age, you don't get the kid who's got like straight C's applying to Yale just for fun, right? Like most kids at this point have the GPA, the test scores of this and that. I would venture to say 34,500 were probably, check the boxes. They worked day and night and they got it down to the 8,700 kids who Yale felt should be accepted to Yale. But what was the problem? They could only say yes to 2,000. So think of that number. How many kids are at Carnegie? 2,000?
600.
850. Yeah, it's pretty small. Yeah.
So think about, 9 times, 7 times, whatever, my math, but think of that number who have to get rejected, who Yale wanted to say yes to. So when you're talking about trying to get into these competitive schools, like anything you could do to differentiate yourself, like, and he's got a 1550 and she's got a perfect score, right? Like these are the things that could end up pushing you over the edge. I see someone in the chat, just to be clear, is this advice primarily for private competitive schools? It applies to the public schools. The UT system is very competitive, especially for UT Austin, obviously. It does not apply just to the privates. And let me also just give this advice for everyone. If you've got a student on here who's got straight B's or straight C's or and they're not going to go for these hyper competitive schools, I always say, look, always do in your actions the things that would help you get into a competitive school, not to get into the competitive school, but because they're going to help you for the rest of your life. If you think about the underlying messages that the schools are sending by wanting kids to do things like extracurriculars, why do they want them to do extracurriculars? Well, one, it shows engagement. That's someone who's also probably going to be engaged and enhance the experience on my campus. It shows the ability to work well with others. It shows the ability, if they're a leader, to lead. It also shows the ability to be led, which is a really important skill in the workplace. Why do they want you to do community service? Well, it shows the core skill of empathy, that you can care for others, right? Why do they want you to do meaningful summer experience instead of sitting around playing video games, right? Well, that is a chance for the human mind in this very critical growth and development phase of the brain to mature and to grow. And we want that kind of a kid on our campus. So even though everything we're talking about, I have been talking about it like it's for the competitive schools, it's for every school. Even if you have a school that's got a 90% acceptance rate, doing all of these things, finding your lane, extracurricular, community service, summer spring, it's going to be super helpful for you.
So I know we're a little bit past the time, and since you are coming back next week, maybe if there's any remaining questions, people could feel free to email me, and I will make sure that Perry and Barbara have access to those, or we can just talk them through live on the Zoom. If that's okay, does that, I think.
Yeah. I'm happy.
If we could all, I mean, like, I can feel your passion through the Zoom. I think this is a topic you've landed in a spot. Talk about fit. That's a good fit for you. I would conjecture. And so
Danielle,
we could talk for hours probably about it. But
Exactly.
Hey, Danielle, as we wrap up, I did want to give Maria a quick minute to kind of talk about just some PTO business. But I do, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank Perry and Steve, both of you, for making time to be here today. This has been a really, really interesting talk. And I know everybody on the call, as well as I did get several messages beforehand that people were going to access this via video as well. So you are now infamous at CVHS. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Maria, if you are here.
Can I just say one quick thing, just because I saw someone ask about the GPA and test scores? When you are looking at a school with GPA and test scores, guys, they're usually going to give you a middle 50% range. You need to be at the upper end of that range. So if they say, oh, our test scores are 1400 to 1480, right? Your score needs to be near the 1480. The 1400s are for the legacies and the athletes and like that's what brings the sort of lower end of the spectrum. So if you're looking at them, just always be thinking of like, okay, when I see this range, be looking at the higher one as you think about your kids' chances at that school. So anyway.
And is it on the GPA, is it fair to say be careful, because those hold so many, I mean, the curriculum could be different. The metric, how they score the GPAs, all of it. It's like, I don't think you can look at apples to apples GPAs.
100%. And look, I looked at the school report, or I forget what they call it. I just blanked on it, but the school report for Carnegie, and Carnegie's going to be a known entity amongst a lot of these schools, and so they're going to be well aware of the past kids and what their scores were, and so they will take it into the context of Carnegie, and that's a really important thing to know. And your school next door, literally 5 minutes away, is going to look totally different in the eyes of the admissions officer. So that is a good point.
Thank you so much. I see tons of thank yous and enthusiasm in the chat. So really, really appreciate it. We'll see you next week. And I'm handing the mic to Maria Calzada.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. This is super helpful. And as someone who had a kid go through this in 22, who had a perfect SAT and did not get in anywhere that he thought he was going to get in, don't sweat the SAT. They don't care. That's my advice to everyone. Just, they don't care. So there's definitely, it's not when we applied, for sure. Okay, so it's Giving Tuesday, and we are trying to get our numbers up. Every year we are able to raise enough to meet our goal so that we can, the budget that we voted on, which I'm sure everybody was at the meeting and everybody was there and gave a lot of thought and time and energy into this budget. So I'm sure you all have the numbers memorized. I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, so the budget is what helps us pay for clubs to go to all these competitions, and for teachers to get, all the stuff that they get, like lunch and, all the little bells and whistles that keep our teachers that have, master's degrees and PhDs and whatnot on a public education salary, even though they're being undermined every day, and gets them to stay where they are, all that stuff. We can't do it. Our kids cannot get a private school education on public school dollars without us. So I'm sure that the kind of people that come to these things are probably also the same kind of people who have already donated. So I'm sorry to keep berating the same people. So if you've already donated and you're already tapped out, I completely understand. So Maybe bug the really proud grandparents who love to brag about the grandkids, or maybe the aunts and uncles, or friends, rich people you work for, whatever. Just ask them, tell them it's Giving Tuesday, tell them it's the end of the year and they need a tax deduction, but try to tap people for some extra dollars so that we can meet our budget for the year, so we can pay for all the stuff that we said we would do this year. So the link is in the chat. If not, you can always go to cvhspto.org if you think about it later and you don't have the link. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Is there a separate Giving Tuesday link, or do we go to, like, if we go to the
Same
main
link.
webpage, just click donate?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Be well, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
And
Thanksgiving, everybody.
you're it on the mad dash to the next holiday break.
Yep.
Bye.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, everyone.